Shadow Slave. By Guiltythree. Chapter 1199, Battle of the Black Skull, 13. Sunny had done it. He had dismantled Dire Fong's astonishing battle style, and peered into the very essence of it. The core of the Saint's combat technique was laid bare, with all its components, the body, the mind, and the soul, revealed to Sunny with stark clarity. With that knowledge, he could predict what Dire Fong would do. He could even perform some of the same things despite the difference in their aspects and physiques. And armed with that understanding, Sunny finally realized that there was no way for them to win. The fearsome Saint was just too powerful, skilled, and intelligent. He held the outcome of the battle in a firm grasp, biding his time until the perfect opportunity inevitably presented itself. And their own strength was not enough to change that outcome. Even if Sunny knew that a strike was coming, he would not necessarily be fast enough to dodge it. Even if he knew the enemy's intent, he would not be strong enough to survive it. And neither would Nephi's. At least if their level of strength, already unthinkable for mere masters, remained the same. But it did not have to, did it? Do you trust me? What a loaded question. Sunny had his reasons, but it was true that he had gone against Nef's wishes in pretty much every instance where it mattered. He had abandoned her in the Dark City, refused to leave her in the Crimson Spire, and then fled from her again at the Grand Ball of Clan Valor. Just to end up by her side anyway. It was a bit funny, and a bit sad, but most of all, Sunny wasn't sure if she did actually trust him. He wasn't even sure if he himself would have trusted him. The same was true the other way around. And yet, as far as he could see, that was their only chance to emerge from this fight alive. If he could only prove to her somehow that. I do, what? The calm answer came almost instantly. In it startled him. Huh. Sunny dashed away to avoid being caught in the Saint's maw, dove under lightning-fast claws, and barely managed to get out of the way of a stream of billowing white flame that covered his retreat. Well. That makes things easier. He called upon a certain memory, and sent Nephi's a short thought, then, in about 5 seconds. Give it all to me. 5 seconds was the amount of time needed for the memory to manifest itself. It was not a very large amount of time. But in a battle against a saint, it was like an eternity. Sunny had long pushed himself to his limits, and then well past them. Even while empowered by the shadow shell and augmented both by his shadows and Nef's flame, he could feel the terrible strain of the battle slowly breaking his body down. It was already in a bad state, and would only continue to crumble as time went on. However, it had not broken yet. Gritting his teeth, Sunny threw himself into the furious crucible of battle. Dire Fong's massive body moved with dreadful speed, each of his limbs posing a fatal threat. His attacks were vicious, devastating, and explosive, but also perfectly timed and chillingly calculated. Sunny knew when they would come and from where, but despite that, it was not easy to withstand the savage barrage of lethal blows unleashed by the monstrous beast. The ground split and trembled around them, and the clouds of steam created by Nef's flames obscured everything around. And yet, he did withstand it. Exactly 5 seconds later, Sunny pushed himself off the muddy ground with 3 hands and flew forward, the tip of the Sin of Solace aimed at Dire Fong's neck. The Saint easily dodged it and retaliated with a powerful blow, which Sunny awkwardly blocked. He let out a pained scream and was thrown backward, in the direction where Nephi's was rising from her knees. Sunny landed on his feet and struggled to maintain his balance as he slid through the mud. He might have fallen, but she stepped forward and supported him from behind, placing a hand on his back. Both of them were standing, but they had lost the advantage of surrounding the enemy from 2 sides. Worse than that, they were both in the single line of attack now, Nephi's hidden behind the towering figure of the Shadow Fiend. Dire Fong's bestial eyes ignited with satisfied malice. And at the same time, Sunny's 5th shadow, as well as all of Nef's flame, poured from her hand and into his shell, leaving her entirely exposed, but gifting him with twice the amount of physical augmentation. Instantly, his power exploded. His strength, his speed, his endurance, his agility, all of it soared to heights that Sunny had never experienced before. The two of them had experimented with augmenting each other in his basement, but he had not invented the shadow shell yet back then. Now, all the parts came together to create a truly terrifying combination. Of course, it was not the smartest of tactics. By making one of them exceedingly strong while leaving the other one weak, they were giving Direfang a perfect opportunity to get rid of the weaker enemy first, and then deal with the other one without being encumbered by the numerical disadvantage. But that was only true if the Saint survived long enough to figure out what happened. Sunny was not planning on giving him such a chance. He had to finish this fight in one exchange. So, I don't just need to kill a Saint, I also need to kill him with one strike. Well, isn't it wonderful? There was no more time to think. Only to kill. Sunny cleared his mind of all unnecessary thoughts, except for one, an axiom he knew too well. The essence of combat is murder. He was going to murder Saint Direfang, the vassal of the great clan Song, right here and now. There was no doubt or hesitation, no room for failure. Only certainty. The terrifying, towering beast in front of him opened his maw, ready to let out a deafening roar. Feeling the polished ivory of the bone singer manifest itself into his hand, Sunny flooded his body with smoldering essence, and lunged forward. Chapter 1200, Battle of the Black Skull, 14. Time was moving very slowly. No, it was Sunny who was moving too fast. It almost felt as if the world had frozen. The rain was suspended in the air, the fountains of mud had grown still, the distant figures of dying awakened were like grotesque statues. In this nearly static world, only two things seemed unbound by paralysis, the monster saint in front of him, who was no slower than Sunny himself, and a bolt of lightning that was crawling across the sky, extending toward the ground as it forked and illuminated the bloody battlefield. Faster. Suddenly, a deafening roar exploded from Direfang's mouth, strangely distorted and haunting. It would have hit Sunny like a wall. But he was prepared. Oin the silenced enchantment of the emerald bone flute activated, creating a dome of absolute silence around him. Sunny passed through the sorceress roar without being struck by its crushing power. However, behind him, Nephi's had to endure its full weight without the protection of her flames. Stripped of their augmentation, she couldn't resist it like she had before. Erasing the image of her falling figure from his mind, Sunny concentrated on the task. If anything, the importance of success had only become more stark now that his partner was debilitated. If he failed, both of them were going to die. But he had already rejected the possibility of failure. He was going to win. He was going to do what he promised to do. He was going to kill a damned saint. At that moment, Direfang was more than a chance adversary to Sunny. He was the embodiment of everything Sunny wanted to destroy, the rotten authority of the great clans, the vile curse of the chain of nightmares, the torturous brand of powerlessness that he bore on his soul ever since Falcon Scott. The inescapable shackles of fate. He was the enemy. A terrifying enemy, an overwhelmingly powerful enemy, an enemy that was nearly impossible to defeat. But if Sunny somehow did manage to defeat him, then maybe he would be able to overcome the other impossible obstacles that pressed him into the ground, one day. Sunny was tired of losing. He had lost in the Antarctic Center, and now, because of Mordred and his cursed schemes, he was on the verge of losing here in East Antarctica, as well. And so, he was willing to bet everything on this one strike. He had no choice but to finish it all with one strike, not only because Nephi's was weakened and vulnerable right now, but also because of the nature of the aspect powers Direfang possessed. The saint's already terrifying physical might was augmented by rage and pain. If Sunny delivered him a serious wound but failed to make it fatal, then that augmentation would only explode further, turning his enemy into a truly unstoppable monster. He only had one chance. Sunny had already accomplished 3 incredible feats to earn that single chance. He had learned the secrets of Direfang's aspect, deciphered the battle style of the transcendent monster, and found a way to counteract his debilitating sonic attack. Now, all that remained was to cut him down with a sword. Not that it would be easy. The saint was not waiting passively to be killed. He was already moving, rushing forward with speed that exceeded all reason. His claws were ready to tear Sunny apart, and his fangs were ready to sink into Sunny's flesh. Even though the gap of power between them had narrowed tremendously, Direfang still had an edge in terms of strength, weight, and sheer size. But that was all right. As a survivor of the Forgotten Shore, Sunny was a master of killing things that were larger and more powerful than him. And while he had absorbed the essence of Direfang's battle style into Shadow Dance, the saint had not gotten a firm grasp of his own technique yet. How could he, when Sunny's technique was as formless and shapeless as shadows? All Dire Fong could do was try and predict how his enemy would act based on his formidable experience of participating in countless battles. However, there was a problem with that approach, too. That was because the Saint had never fought a shadow spawn before. He was still judging Sunny as if Sunny was a mere human. But while Sunny still considered himself a human, he was also a bit more. As the two of them closed the distance, prepared to strike, Sunny used the inherent flexibility of a shadow dance practitioner to bend his body in an extreme and almost unnatural way. At the same time, he used the physical characteristics of his fiendish shell to switch from running on 2 feet to a low, beast-like gait. As a result, the Saint's claws tore through the raindrops above his head, while his momentum remained the same. Sunny gritted his teeth and let out a bestial growl as he used all his prodigious strength to push himself off the ground and leap into the air. Dire Fong was too fast and skilled to allow the unexpected attack to reach its mark, though. A split second before Sunny could bring his sword down on the Saint's neck. A massive clawed hand pushed forward, catching him in the chest. The power of that blow was too terrible. The onyx of the mantle cracked and exploded, as if struck by 5 transcendent swords. The manifested shadows comprising the Shadow Fiend shell were instantly sliced and torn apart. In an instant, the shadow spawn was mutilated beyond recognition. The upper portion of his torso was entirely destroyed, exploding into a fountain of darkness. His horned head was severed and flew into the air. 2 of his 4 arms were ripped off. The entire mangled carcass was thrown back. The Sin of Solace slipped from his fingers. That was the thing, though. The shell of the Shadow Fiend was a towering monstrosity that stood at almost 3 meters of height. Sunny, meanwhile, was a young man of a rather modest stature. So, he could easily change the internal structure of the shell in a way that would allow him to sacrifice the upper portion of it while remaining perfectly unscathed. Almost at the same time as Dire Fong's claws tore through the upper chest and neck of the Shadow Fiend, the whole shell suddenly lost its coherence, starting to dissolve back into the ethereal shadows. And, just below the harrowing cut, the top of Sunny's head was revealed. The dissipating shell was thrown back by the strike, but his own body, freed from its embrace, continued to fly forward like a bullet. Time stood still. Catching the hilt of the Sin of Solace with his own human hand, Sunny used the tremendous augmentation of shadow and flame to fill his muscles with dreadful strength. And drove the tip of his sword into the Saint's bestial eye.